So let's talk about the fitra. I've mentioned this prior to this video too, but I want to give a bit more detail in regards to what we mean by the fitra in this video, and also how this idea of the fitra is not, or this idea of innate knowledge is not unique to Islam. Now let's start off by discussing what the fitra is. Now when we refer to the fitra, we are referring to the innate disposition, the innate nature of the human being. And within this nature are elements of knowledge. But what's of interest to us is that the specific elements being that God exists and that He deserves worship. Every human being is born with this reality deep down inside. The Prophet, peace be upon him, for example, said that every child is born upon the fitra, but it's his parents that make him a Jew, a Christian, or a fire worshipper, meaning his parents take him away from this natural state, the natural state which recognizes the one true God and that creator deserves worship. In other words, if we can take a bit of an extended understanding of this, which is that his society, his environment changes, or not changes, but covers, clouds, cloaks that truth which resides within the human being. Now also the Quran, we find God mentioned, for example, in chapter 30, verse 30, He says, Fitrat Allah, the nature, the fitra that of Allah, of God, meaning the fitra that God has created that every single human being upon. And the verse continues to highlight that, or where God suggests that we should incline towards this nature. Right? Now, what's profound about the fitra is that it's, if anything, it's a profound blessing from the perspective that it gives the human being a tool, a gauge by which he can assess reality. So for example, when the human being comes across revelation from God and they read the revelation, something deep down inside recognizes that revelation, acknowledges it, and it becomes almost as a check, almost like two pieces of the puzzle that come together and fit perfectly. Right? So it's profound from that perspective. Also, when the human being reflects upon nature, looks into the universe, looks into the fine-tuning of the universe, again, something deep down inside recognizes and bears testament to the fact that there is something that's, or someone that's put all of this in place and created all of this. And that's something profound. Now, this idea of the fitra, this innate disposition, is not unique to Islam. Prior to the 17th and 18th century, this was, I would say, the predominant view throughout history. Let's go all the way back. For example, one of the most eminent philosophers in history, Plato, right? In his dialogues, for example, where Socrates is the predominant character, there is this understanding that we get of innate knowledge. For example, in Meno, one of his dialogues where Socrates is seen to be having a discussion with this guy called Meno. And the discussion is about virtue, but eventually it gets to the point where Meno now challenges Socrates in regards to knowledge, and he presents this paradox where he says, look, you know, if you know something, then you know it, and there's nothing to know about it because you already know it. But if you don't know something, then it's impossible for you to know about that thing because you don't know what that thing is that you're inquiring about. It's impossible. So in regards to this paradox, Socrates responds in a very interesting way. He appeals to what we now know as the doctrine of recollection, or what's come to be known as the doctrine of recollection, which is this idea that the human, prior to their physical existence in its spirit form, whatever he means by this, is instilled with knowledge. And hence when we're born into this material existence, what we're doing is we're not learning new things, we are simply recollecting, we're recalling knowledge which is already within us, right? So he's referring to an a priori type of knowledge which is there prior to our experience of the world and us gaining knowledge from experiencing and engaging with the world. And in the dialogue itself, it's a very interesting dialogue. He then, I think one of his servants, Meno's servants, he calls him forward and he sort of tried to demonstrate this point. He asks him certain questions about geometry and certain shapes. And by stimulating this individual with the questions, the individual now starts producing the answers. And this individual has no prior knowledge or experience of geometry. And he highlights, or he tries to highlight to Meno through doing this, that, well, look, I'm not teaching him anything. I'm just asking the right questions, which is triggering a truth from within him, right? So again, it's quite in line with what I'm saying in regards to the fitra. And also what's interesting is that there are passages in the Quran. There's a passage where God is speaking to the angels and He says, I'm going to create a being on earth. And the angels respond by saying, well, are you going to create a being that causes bloodshed and corruption? And God responds by saying, I know what you do not know. And then God proceeds to teaching Adam the names of all things. We don't know what these things are. It's not mentioned. But what we do know is that God proceeds to teaching. God teaches Adam the names of all things. And then He asks the angels, well, what are these things? And they don't know. And then God brings Adam in front of the angels and says, well, tell them the names of these things. And he does. And then God tells the angels to fall into prostration out of respect to Adam. Now again, we get this idea, this understanding of the a priori knowledge that's been given to Adam, being taught to Adam prior to him coming into this world and experiencing the world and gaining knowledge through experience and his interactions with the physical material world. Now, again, there's a lot of interesting overlay here which we can look into further, but the point being that there were these ideas prior. There was this view that we are born with innate knowledge. Even more recently, in the 20th century, individuals like Carl Jung, a phenomenal psychologist, and when you read some of his works are just mind-blowing, the stuff, the insights he has. He even mentions this idea of archetypes. And when he refers to the archetypes, he's talking about the contents, it's a collective contents of, or the contents of the collective unconscious. And what he's, in a nutshell, without going into too much detail, what he is suggesting is that the human beings, we have the conscious, then you have the unconscious, which is the personal type of unconscious, which is individual to the person, and then there is a collective unconscious, meaning that there is an element of the psyche of the human being which humanity shares, not with each other, but there are elements of that psyche, or there is information within the psyche of the human being which is universal. And this is expressed in the form of stories and images and ideas throughout human history. And when you study these things, which he did, you would see patterns emerging, right? Which led him to this theory, and it's a very interesting idea. And one of his students really sort of put it in another way, which I think really gives us a bit more clarity. He said, look, just like the organs, the physical organs of the human are formed and take their place during the stages of development in the womb, in the same way there are psychic organs which align themselves and take shape, and these are the archetypes, right? So again, referring to a type of a priori knowledge, if you like, that's instilled within the human being prior to them engaging with the world and acquiring knowledge through the engagement with the world. The point being, the reason I'm mentioning these things is just to give us some insight in regards to the fact that prior to the 17th and 18th century, where you had thinkers such as John Locke, when he wrote upon education and suggested this idea of tabula rasa, that the human being is a blank slate and then we acquire knowledge. Prior to this, the predominant view, and you will see it pop up over and over again, there was this clear idea that human beings are born with prior knowledge. Now, I'm not sharing these things with you. I'm not referring to Plato or Jung just to, strengthen Islam. No, we don't need this. But the reason I'm mentioning these things is because it may allow us to better appreciate this idea of knowledge that's instilled within human beings. And also, it may allow some people that, especially people that are used to thinking in a certain way, living in the 21st century, it may allow them to better appreciate the Islamic tradition and to take it a little bit more seriously, and therefore to look into it. And this is where I'm trying to get people, just to really sincerely look into Islam, because I really believe when people look into Islam and they read the Quran, it will speak to them, right? They will recognize its truth for themselves. No one needs to tell them this. No one needs to prove this to them. But we need to give ourselves the opportunity to do this, to sincerely and honestly approach the Quran. Hopefully, me sharing these things will really get us to sort of at least take those steps. And that's why I shared this. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below and your ideas, and let's have this discussion in the comments below too. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe, click the notification bell, and until next time, take care.